look at the news and I hear all the lies, I wonder what's the use in trying. It's all a little familiar. I see the whole world go stepping up in line behind a sexual abusing pathological lie, and I scream from the top of my lungs, what's going on? And I said, what's going on? And I said, I said, what's going on?
Hi.
So I cry sometimes when I look
What's
at the
happening?
news and I hear all the lies. I wonder what's the use in trying.
Hey,
So
how are you?
Good. I don't know where the music is coming from.
That's me. Sorry.
Oh, it is. Okay, good. I was like, wait, is that mine?
Nope, it's me. I was getting ready to get started. I was just grabbing a couple things.
Oh, yeah. Take your time. We got another 5 minutes before folks join. So we just wrapped up the keynote. I don't know if you were in there. We hope that we have good participation. It's been interesting to learn how the Zoom meeting, like the Zoom events work with the Zoom meetings.
Yes. I did not get my slides turned in.
Oh, that's okay.
So I put them here in Canva and sharing with everybody. So I hope people can access them.
Yeah. We've got Kara coming in.
Hey.
Hey, Crystal.
Kara Parrish. Hi.
Hey.
So we'll wait a couple more minutes
Yes.
until 1 o'clock and then get going.
Yeah, I was just playing some music, getting ready.
I always freak out because I like host these. Sometimes I'm like, is that my audio? And I don't know where I'm playing it from. Now I'm gonna have to figure out how to stop.
So were there a lot of people in the keynote?
Yeah, it's hard to
Good.
tell because it projects into, so we have like 207 folks who registered for the event. And so some folks, when you go into the lobby, you can see the key, whatever webinar is happening, it like projects into the lobby. So it's hard to know how many people are watching at any point because
Yeah.
you can only see like the participants who've like joined the room. And then it's hard to see like, yeah, I don't know, Kara, as a part of our tech team, if you know more about that, but
Yeah, Casey has been Casey and Emily have been dealing with the tech more than I have. And so, yeah, it's definitely a different setup than I'm used to. And I noticed as a participant, I couldn't see who was on the call at all. But as somebody who, if you're a co-host, then you can kind of see the participants. I think that's what it seemed like for me on my end.
Well, I'm excited to share. Yeah, I'm wondering how 2 hours on Zoom is going to go.
yeah, and we don't have to take all of that time too. And we'll
Okay.
see, this is recording. So the good part is that we can, record this and put it out later if folks don't figure out how to find their way into the Zoom rooms.
Yes, yes. And I can share out my slides too. I will send those to you.
Yeah, I got those right here. I see them here.
Yeah, if somebody else could share, I tried to pull them up, but I could not pull them up. Usually I can share my screen and I'll keep sharing.
I can do that.
Okay.
I'm gonna download them as a PowerPoint.
Yes. Okay, that works.
And I will share them that way.
I don't have Microsoft, so yeah, I tried that, but I don't have Microsoft an account.
Yeah, let me make sure that they look beautiful.
Good, good. Yeah, they're just basic. I do a lot of talking and doing more than that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'll help bring people in.
One. Okay. Oops. Here's Kelly. Yeah. Welcome. We're just going to wait another minute and then we'll get started. I'm going to go ahead just to have it queued up, Annette,
Yes,
and share.
that works. I'm going to try to go on. Yeah, there we go. On
I think you should be able to see, and I'm going to put it in
Yeah.
slideshow view. Oop. Let's see. Where is it? I want to see slideshow. Does that look good?
Yeah, that looks amazing. Yeah.
Well, you can just tell me as you want to advance the slides, but
Okay. I will.
we're at the top of the
Yeah.
hour if you want to get started. I know we've got several folks in here already, and I'll just keep letting folks in as they arrive.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. So I'll get started. I'm gonna try to put this in gallery view because I like to look at people. So if you're there, I would love to look at you. I hope that you've come to learn about community land trust. I love to talk about community land trust. My name's Annette Hines, and I am the organizer with Kentucky Tenants in Moorhead. We also have a chapter in Lexington. And I just want to start out saying thanks for spending time with me, and especially if you're very interested in community land trust, because that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. I'm also going to talk about our project and how we incorporated art in our quilt squares in our project and what home means to us. That was our theme for this project. And I hope you're going to leave with a better understanding about cultural organizing and how we use it to educate others about, different systems that work to solve our problems. Quick housekeeping, please come off of mute and post, talk to me. It looks like we're going to have a small group, so definitely if you have questions, if I go too fast, because I tend to talk fast and, throw out some big concepts, stop me and ask me, we can talk about it. I definitely want to make this accessible. I also want it to be a brave space. That's kind of how we do things. We want people, to engage. Relationships are the basis of all of our work. And that's how we're going to make change, building these relationships out. Also speak from your experience, step up, step back, use ouch and oops, if we bump into something, just be brave. So for me, and you can start the PowerPoint, the first little slide is just kind of something cool I thought AI, would do for us. And then the second one is I'll go there. The second one is kind of what we're going to do. I'm going to talk about Kentucky Tenants, what we do, how we got into doing this project. Also, I want everybody to understand what a community land trust is and think about alternative housing. I would love it if you share stories about home and what home means to you. I'm also going to share some easy quilt square techniques that we did. And I hope at the end, you'll get involved and take some action with us. Next slide. So this is how we got started. I'm an organizer with Kentucky Tenants, and we have a lot of people that are very interested in art and also housing. And so we sit down and thought about how can we incorporate this. And another thing that we did as Kentucky Tenants was we went out and we canvassed 2,000 people in our neighborhood. And we ask them what the issues are. And so I would love it if anybody would come off of mute and share, what you know about housing issues in especially Eastern Kentucky, but Kentucky in general. Anybody want to share with me?
I am not in Kentucky, but I am curious if it's kind of the same issues as many places that I've been, where it's just a lot of influx of people buying second homes. And so both places I've been recently is very touristy. So tourism is wonderful, but at the same time, it seems to really affect the housing for the people who live and work in those spaces. So I don't, again, Not in Kentucky, but excited to hear the similarities.
I would say absolutely, yes. Our local economic development is all about that tourism. They want that economic tourism. And there have been a lot of Airbnbs spring up in Moorhead, really shocked about that. But they are the better places to stay. Our hotels have deteriorated, There aren't very many in Eastern Kentucky either. And yeah, it shoots up definitely the prices. Anybody else want to share what they think some of the issues are? And yeah, I'm sure we're sharing them across the United States right now.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, I know that in Kentucky we have, and I'm sure it's the same in the rest of the Central Appalachian region, have a lack of affordable housing just writ large, and then a real lack of rental as well, affordable rental, that's safe and dignified housing. And then layered on top of that, we're now seeing the effects of like what I guess we would call disaster capitalism, like now that we've had some climate disasters and folks have lost their homes, so folks are rebuilding, and then we're also seeing private developers come in and purchase land out from underneath folks.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad that leads me into my next kind of thought is that is kind of how Kentucky Tenants got started, was out of developers coming in. Yeah, and that's how it's been historically in Eastern Kentucky for a long time. People come in with these great ideas and they change things for us. Down on the bottom corner on the right, if you're facing the screen, is some land. It's called North Fork. It was in the news several years back. There are about 100 families that live, that is a trailer park that was right off the highway. There were 100 families who lived there, and it was a private sale, but our local government got involved because of tourism. They raised the property taxes. They turned it into a TIF, and it currently now houses Cattleman's, Huck's, McDonald's, and another restaurant. And out of those 100 families, only 3 of them currently live in our county. Everybody else had to leave. And as we were out canvassing, we found out that rents are rising. And that is one of the reasons tourism, they're coming in and developing different places. Rent has gone from $600 to an average of $1,200 here in Moorhead. I was on the phone with people from Cincinnati the other day, and that's what they pay for rent, for an apartment. And I was really surprised about that. I'm like, our rent prices are the same in Eastern Kentucky. When in Moorhead, I'm not sure, again, other places, but there are 63 fast food restaurants. So that is our major employer. We also have the college and the hospital, but they mainly employ people from out of town or hire professionals. So most people that rent, and Moorhead is 67% tenants, renters, which is huge. Most of the cities in Eastern Kentucky typically have a huger renter population than the county does. So that's 67% of the people who live here, and most of the jobs available to them are minimum wage, and you cannot rent an apartment on that. So when North Fork happened, we started digging in and doing a lot of canvassing and talking to people about, what issues there were, what we needed to do, and we came up with a long-term and a short-term strategies that we're working on. And today I want to talk about our long-term strategy. I will mention our short-term strategies are proactive rental inspections, because a lot of our people live in mold. Nobody brought up mold. I'm surprised about that because mold is huge, especially with the climate disaster. And a lot of our cities are down in valleys, and so a lot of them tend to flood. And so that's been a big issue in our community, deteriorating, housing stock. Yeah, we need more rentals. We have more people coming into our area, and a lot of other issues around housing. So those are some issues that we are working on. But our long-term strategy, we started thinking about, how we could work towards finding ways to own our own property, own our own land, control our own land, So what we thought about was we need to educate people on different ways to do that. So we started digging in, a group of us, and you can see some of us in these other pictures. These are long-term members that are working on our community land trust. What we started to do was do research. We started having meetings, with just different people across the state and started talking about it. And then, like I said, we have several artists that are involved, and they're like, why don't we write a grant and try to get some money to really reach out to other people to share these concepts, because people really don't understand that there are alternative ways to do housing. And so again, we wrote a grant, and this is just kind of some basics, and then I'll really get into kind of our thinking about this. We wrote a grant to the Kentucky Women's Foundation, myself and an artist. Her name's Kat Smith. She goes by Material Drifter, if you know her, an amazing fabric artist out of Lexington. We wrote this grant together and decided we were going to visit several cities, and we were going to have them do some art while we talked about community land trust and like what home meant to them and how they could maybe expand or think about community land trust in their community. And so we did that. We were awarded the grant, which was amazing. And so we've been working on that the last 2 or 3 years, about 2 years, and going to different communities and sitting down and working on these community quilt squares with them. And we have created several quilts with it that we hope to eventually auction off. So that's kind of the basics of about how we really got into doing this project. And what we started with was, why a quilt? Why do we want to? We've been asked a lot, why a quilt? Why not sculpture or, drawing or something like that? We felt like when communities were asked to imagine these collective futures, that quilting would be a real connection to Appalachia. And we felt like, home is one of those words that holds a lot of concepts that we could connect to quilting, roof, rent, holler, blocks.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was actually thinking I might just listen for some of it, but because I don't know how to make 2 screens do. Okay.
We also wanted to make it very tactile and welcoming. Like I said, we believe that relationships, are how we are going to make this change. We think home can be radical too. We wanted to transform an ordinary object into, something about memory, place, and possibility, present, past, and future. So what home means to us quilt project, we use a collaborative textiles to invite women, girls, gender expansive people, anybody into, what we're doing and what home means to them on their own terms, and that way that they can share it. A lot of people also, especially in lower income communities, don't have access to art and art materials. So that was one of the most important parts about the project, is that we had these materials available for them to do these quilt squares. And we wanted to make sure that the project was also grounded in Appalachian culture. We really thought about quilt squares, story circles, mutual aid, feminist art history, things like that. Those are things that we really wanted to ground this project in. We also wanted to make sure, since the Kentucky Women's Foundation sponsored us, we wanted to make sure that we supported, how feminist art was advancing and positive social change, especially elevating voices, and fostering leadership in the different communities. But we also want to shift perspectives into how we can take back, housing in our communities. So we kind of had 3 overlapping frames, the long arc of the quilting, as a woman-led political arm. Also like culture organizing traditions, in the region that kind of connect art and community power. And then kind of feminist theory and practice, making, home resistance, this is how we're going to resist, but making it also very inclusive for all different kind of social groups. I also want to talk a little bit about how, the language that we use in art, memory, politics, has been involved in this project. I think that's very important to this project. Quilting has been kind of ordinary, but extraordinary and very involved in resistance. And that's kind of how we wanted to go about this, in a feminist way. Quilts are made from scraps, at kitchen tables. But they also can identify and show, storytelling as well. They may be from scraps, but, they can produce very powerful images, thoughts. Textiles often offer, people that had been excluded in formal art avenues a way to express themselves. So this was another reason that we chose this. In the late 20th centuries, there was kind of a quilting revival, and we've seen that a little bit lately with other, different kind of exhibits around quilting and politics. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with the National Quilt Museum in Paducah. It's an anchor, for education and contemporary practices in quilting. And it definitely demonstrates that quilts are very much in the art venue now, that people are really paying attention. Community quilts have been really critical for public memory and movement building. Our artist, Kat Smith, talks a lot about the AIDS Memorial quilt. They participated in making those, and how it was conceptualized, by Cleve Jones in '85 and, unveiled. And it was a beautiful, beautiful display. And it was very transformative, with grief, transforming grief into visible collective action. And it educated the public, and it helped shift policy and discourse by, the scale of the quilt. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or have seen it, but some of the squares were, the squares were as big as a person. They were, to represent a person, so they were pretty big. And that model is still traveling globally. So if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. And there are also other quilt kind of art expos. The Dinner Party by Chicago, in the Chicago International Honor Quilt. Judy Chicago has done that. It's 539 pieces. And it's a really cool feminist quilt project, that talks a lot about feminism, and it offers a precedence to a lot of quilting work. So I want to talk a little bit about, cultural organizing and kind of how we have used that with the quilt. Not to be a decoration. We don't want it to be a decoration for our campaign on social housing and community land trust, but we're using it as a core strategy to build relationships by going out into communities and working on these squares together, so that people can share, and we all have home. Everybody has to have a home. And so we talk about, our values when we're sitting down doing these quilt squares with people. We talk about what home really means to people, and people have shared some really intimate stories. And a lot of people came together in different, it was really interesting to see in the different communities who came out. In one of our Eastern Kentucky communities, several of the people who work in bus garages came out, and they brought their families, and they sit down and did a quilt squares with us. And it was really cool because when we got to talking, they got excited about building community and sharing things, because these are a lot of guys that have some really cool skills. They can work on a bus, break down a motor, build a house. And they were talking about a tool library. So immediately during immediately after our quilt square workshop, they started a Facebook page and have started looking for property to create a tool library. So that was really cool. Another, when we went to Northern Kentucky, we went to Union in Northern Kentucky, and some of their city council members came to this, and they wanted to know more about Community Land Trust because they were a little bit familiar with them. And so we talked a lot about the details around Community Land Trust. Well, they made quilt squares. So it was really cool. We've gotten a wide variety of people. We've had quilters come out, and then we've had kids, young people, college students. But it's been really a cool way to build those relationships and to talk about shared values. You know, a lot of us want a safe home. That has been one of the values that came up a lot, is safety, you know. And also a lot of us want community. That has been a huge value that has come up. People want to be connected. They want to, I heard a lot of stories from old timers about living in the holler, you know, and how people are moving to town and they're not living in hollers and taking care of each other. So those were some really cool stories that came out. It's really been really cool. We got some of our ideas also from Highlander. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the Highlander Educational Research Center, but they also popularized culture organizing. And so that was kind of another area that we pulled a lot of info from. And also the Roadside Theater, they do story circles. And it's, you know, structured, equitable. It's an equitable space where people take turns telling stories on a common prompt. And we used, you know, what does home mean to you? And we would go around getting people, you know, talking about what home means to them. It can bridge divides. We've seen that happen. It can heal harms, and it can generate a collective analysis. And we've seen that again in communities that we've been involved in. So the story circles and the quilt circles, you know, they are producing a tangible product, but they also are producing, you know, real social connections. And that's kind of where cultural organizing is, you know, really cool and brings people together. So also, I want to talk a little bit about the feminist kind of choice and aspect. Again, we're very inspired by Bell Hooks. I'm sure you all know Bell Hooks, who's, you know, a really foundational writer about home place. And she talks a lot about how Black women created space of dignity and care and radical subject making, you know, in the face of racist and patriarchal domination. So she was very inspiring, you know, to what we were doing and what we talked about, and about how, you know, we wanted to incorporate, you know, some not plain, but kind of domestic kind of things in our project, you know, because that's kind of what home is. Even though it can be radical, it's also kind of domestic, and everybody kind of belongs. And we kind of got that out of, you know, some of Bell Hooks' works. Feminist theory also reclaims, you know, the textile arts. So we thought that was really important as a political practice, and, you know, bringing that into what we were doing. And again, creating that tangible, portable, you know, thing that we can show, because here at the end, we have created the quilts, and one is at Art Farm right now, and we're going to bring them to the Kentucky Folk Art Center here in Moorhead. Probably late October, early November, to show. And we have like a list of all the people that participated in all the different areas. And it's really cool to see their different focuses on home. We wanted to build a legacy too around this. You know, we wanted to really use these tangible products to make people think about a variety of things and get conversations started about things you wouldn't normally talk about, like zoning, taxes, eviction, land use. Land use was, you know, the main goal, to get people to really think about these things. Quilts also hold space for intersectionality, and that was very important to us as well. You know, race, class, gender, disability, immigrant status, and more. We had a group of immigrants that came in, and did some quilt squares with us as well. We had several people that were disabled that did quilt squares with us, and they all talked about, their issues around home as well. And that was very interesting. And also, they talked about how community land trust, could be, an answer for them as well, and talked about how we could incorporate their issues and their needs into, what a community land trust is. And I'll get more into that later. But their specific quilt blocks also, were very symbolic of, what home meant to them, which I really enjoyed watching people make these quilt squares. I like seeing the symbolism. It's kind of a story quilt of Appalachian, all the different people, like I said, the intersexuality of all the different people, from bus garage mechanics to disabled people and immigrants to city council members. We have a very complex identity here. And so it was really cool. And I also think that this was a project that we really wanted to also build empathy around people that are homeless, that have been evicted, that have harsh stories. And some of the stories that came out that people talked about as well, was like when they were a child and their parents were drug addicts and they didn't have stable homes, and now they do and they want to give back. And so those were some really cool stories as well. Okay. I'm scrolling through my notes here. I want to make sure that I get all these concepts and share these things with you all that we talked about and that kind of made this quilt and made this project happen. And again, if you have questions, please stop me. If you want to talk about something, let me know. So, project design. So we went from kind of a prompt, what do we want to do, to how are we going to do this? So we contacted a variety of different organizations. Several organizations contacted us. We only had enough kind of time to do we said 6, but we ended up doing 9. We went to a couple places twice. And we decided what we were going to do was we were going to introduce ourselves, and then we would do kind of a story circle, 2 minutes about a time, that you felt at home, what home really meant to you. And so we did them in libraries, we did them at City Hall, we did them in different buildings. But we also kind of closed the story with imagination, words, things that came out of what people were saying in the story circles to get people thinking about doing these quilt squares. So it was kind of, the next step was we would sit down and we would kind of draw out our quilt squares. And I have lost some videos, so I'm going to go back here to gallery view. There we go. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So we would sit down and draw out our quilt squares. I'm going to share this. I hope y'all can see this. I'm going to put it up close so that y'all can see this. Maybe. Maybe not.
Might have to turn your blur off. 'cause
Okay.
Blur on, it always makes everything blur.
Thank you. Let me turn that off. Well, I apologize.
You okay?
Not sure how meeting settings got it. Well, it's not on there. Sorry. Okay. I think you can see it. Can you
Annette,
see it here?
if you click on where your video is,
Yes.
there's like a little arrow next to it. If you click that, you don't have it.
No, that's
Okay.
why. Yeah. No. Sorry, I'm on my iPad. Can you all see this? This looks kind of clear. Okay, so we would sit down and Kat would introduce, how to do a quilt square, and how to think about you know, your symbols, things that you wanted to put into the quilt square. So we would start with, you know, do you want a lot of white space or do you want to fill up the space? So she talked a lot about those concepts. I'm not the artist. I'm a crafty person, so I don't want to go too much into that because I don't know about that. But it was really cool to see these kind of concepts and for people to sit down and draw out what they wanted, you know, on their quilt square. And then I'll try to get this one. Yeah. I don't know if it's, see if I can get it. Yeah, it's not going to, we should have, there it is, a color wheel. To get people thinking about the different colors that they might want to use. We use those because most people, again, in low-income communities don't have access to that type of art and things like that. So we introduced some of these artist concepts because we wanted them to feel very confident about their art square, about their quilt square. So we had them draw them out, and then we used different methods. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. We used different easy methods that we thought people could make one very quickly within 2 to 3 hours. That was kind of our range of our project time. And we wanted it to be quick and easy. Then after we had everybody do all these quilt squares, we had some assembly days. And they stitched it together at Art Farm. If you're familiar with Art Farm in Lexington, they brought all the quilt squares together and stitched them together. So that is kind of how it went. And like I said, we are showing it around and talking more about community land trusts right now. We have 2 small quilts that we will be auctioning off and raising money for our community land trust. And a little going on a little bit. So also at the end, we would do a little bit of evaluation because you need to evaluate, you know, what you're doing. So at the end, we would do some kind of basic evaluation. We would ask people, you know, how did you feel, you know, doing this? Do you feel like you belonged? A lot of people really felt that way. We did a follow-up afterwards. We would send like an email out and ask some of the same questions. And several people, like I said, did projects or came together to work on things or talk about things in different areas. So that was really nice to see. We saw a lot of belonging and coming together out of this. We also felt like we bridged a lot of ties. We have some intergenerational kind of work going on. When we first started this, we heard a lot of, especially here in Moorhead, a lot of this is focused in Moorhead. We heard a lot of people saying things like, you know, it's the college's fault. And then the college would be like, you know, it's those old people's fault, you know. So we have some really good intergenerational work that has come out of this, not necessarily on housing either. Like I said, people came together, they started talking about their values and what they were doing. Yes, I'm getting to land trust. Sorry, I'm getting there. And I can, kind of skip on a little bit. I just wanted to, kind of share the, project with you all. So I can move on into the community land trust. If that's definitely, if that's what everybody is here, let's talk about it because I love to talk about, like I said, community land trust. Okay, so if you don't know about community land trust, and I'm going to start with the basics, you know, community land trust is a nonprofit. It's a community rooted organization that takes land off the speculative market. It keeps the land in trust forever. It stewards the homes and other improvements that are on the land, like garages and things like that. I'm starting with kind of the history a little bit. It wants the land and the homes to be affordable for generations, not just today or tomorrow. The basic move is very simple and powerful. The CLT holds title to the land and provides long-term grounded leases for 99 years to homeowners and other users, because you can also do commercial property as well and other things, gardens. There can be a lot of variety of things in a community land trust. The lease includes resale rules so that the home stays affordable for the next household while still allowing sellers to build some equity. So over time, this produces a durable stock of homes in your neighborhood, your community. It also builds budget compatible for working families, new people we're targeting, especially college students. You know, they're leaving Appalachia. This would be a great way to keep them here and together. The mission is long-term stewardship, you know, not a one-time transaction. So I'm going to start a little bit with the history real quick. Well, not real quick, but yeah, start a little bit with the history. I need to check my time. Okay. Because it didn't, you know, just come out of anywhere. It's global. It emerged from long conversations again across continents with a lot of people and movements, rural, civil rights, religious communities, you know, municipal policy experts. You have to get your government involved in your community land trust. You just have to. There's a lot that goes into it and that people think about it. It's not just a concept. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history. You know, the CLTs draw on older land tenure ideas that separate land ownership from building ownership to curb speculation over public purposes. And I'm going to give you a really, really simple idea of, you know, a community land trust. So you buy a house for $100,000. You live in that house in a community land trust. You live in that house 5 years. In the resale, it says that every year you live there, you can add $1,000 onto the price to sell it. Plus, any improvements you make on your property, you can add that value as well. So you build a garage for $25,000. You live on that land for 5 years. So you can sell that in 5 years for $130,000. On the market, it may be worth $300,000, but because you're in the community land trust, you can only sell it for that $130,000, if that makes sense. That's kind of a very base, and we'll go into more details here in a few minutes, but I wanted to give you that base, and that's kind of why it's a long-term strategy. Starting with Henry George, you know, a century earlier, talked about land value and how it should benefit the community and not just the landholder. And that's very important to us. You know, in the 20th century, there were concrete precedents that were most famously the long-term land lease of the Jewish National Fund in Israel. They had village land gifts and trusts in India, you know. It was a movement led by Bahave, B-H-A-V-E. And these examples showed US people, you know, in the 50s and 60s, how land could legally be organized and made not just into a utopian theory, but into real concepts, real hard concepts. And so in the civil rights, the first CLT in the United States was New Communities, and it was incorporated in 1969 in Georgia by Black farmers. They organized the charades. Charlie and Shirley are famous, you know, for organizing their CLT, and they organized with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They sought a way to hold land collectively and lease it to farmers and lease homes to families who'd been punished economically for asserting their rights. Sherrod, Charles and Shirley Sherrod, very, very famous in the civil rights movement and forming this. And also the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was very essential in coordinating new communities. They purchased thousands of acres to establish a safe haven for Black land stewards. And there were a lot of external pressures. Yep, Shirley Sherrod, yes. There was a severe drought, and they had a lot of financial barriers that ultimately cost them some of their land in the 80s. Also, the United States Department of Agriculture took some of their land. There was a lot of push back on the Black farmers. But they survived as a corporation, and they later won restitution against the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which was really cool. It's a very symbolic story of resilience, that cemented the community land trust idea, in the United States. A lot of people followed their what they were doing. People who worked with new communities helped carry, the model forward. They created what they call the Community Land Trust, a guide to new model for land tenure in America. It was written by Robert Swan. And they launched, some institutional infrastructures, the International Independence Institute, community economics, to spread, information about the community land trust. And this was in the early 70s, late 60s. It laid out core features that we still use today: nonprofit ownership of land, long-term ground leasing, resale controls to preserve affordability, and also opening membership and board seats to people beyond just the people who own houses. So even with these, foundations and these exciting ideas in the 70s, CLTs and community land trusts the ideas did not flourish. Thank you, Laura. Yes. These ideas are very counterculture, holding land in community and things. So the concept of buying home leased was very unfamiliar, and the ideas were pushed to make money on land. And, we've all seen the result of that. So in the 80s, however, a community which I did not know about till I really started getting into this research a couple of years ago, a community in Cincinnati in 1981 was one of the first urban CLTs. A lot of people had adopted kind of agricultural CLTs, buying farmland. But in Cincinnati, they created a coalition. And it stemmed from displacement of Black residents in the West End of Cincinnati. It showed, though, when they bought land together, that CLTs could work in an urban area as well. So that was really exciting. I think that was kind of another turning point for the CLT movement. Another huge one is the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative in Boston. They are huge. They organize residents to fight disinvestment and land speculation. In Dorchester, in an unprecedented move, Boston granted them eminent domain and powers to assemble vacant land, allowing the CLTs to guide reinvestment without displacement, which is very exciting. The experiment provided that CLTs can be vehicles for development without displacement in a hot market, very hot market. Another huge one is Burlington, Vermont. It's called Champlain Housing Land Trust now. They're amazing. And they have utilized a lot of different concepts to build out a huge community land trust. They started in 1984. It was the first U.S. city to help launch a fund to be part of a broader affordability agenda. So they're very involved in the community land trust movement. They partnered with several different cities, and they've integrated a shared equity home ownership model as well, with strong rental and community facilities. So it's not just home ownership. They have rentals and also community facilities. They're very committed to seed funding and the housing trust fund, which is very interesting to us, especially. And their priority is for permanent affordability in home ownership. So they made, the CLT integral to their city's housing policy as well. They work with their local government and made that integral, which, again, if you know, in Eastern Kentucky, most of our cities do not have housing in their budget. Here in Moorhead, there is no money for housing. They do zoning, and that's kind of about it with housing here in our city. And I'm sure a lot of the other communities don't have housing in their budget as well. So that's why this is very exciting to me, and has made our group, our campaign, talk to our city council, and we hope in the future to get some money for housing in there, especially when it comes to community land trust. So anyways, okay. Another one, we showed a film a while back about the Cooper Square Community Land Trust. It is a building in downtown New York. They fought for 50 years to get their community land trust off the ground, and they won. The residents pay $250 a month in downtown New York currently. So that's very exciting, you know, to me. And it was very exciting to our group when we watched the movie and learned about them, because they fought a long time, but they won. And, you know, in New York, you can't find, you know, you probably couldn't stand somewhere for $250 a month. You know, it's very expensive. So that was very exciting to us, and it was very motivational and inspiring. So I just wanted to share that with you all too. So does anybody want to hear about CHODOs and federal regulations? Raise your hand if you do. If not, I can get really into details. Okay, I'm going to move on past that part. I will say that a lot of that I have been in conversations with nonprofit developers recently, because we have started a community land trust here. We have a nonprofit, and we have built capacity. We have a board and things like that. And this is also how Champlain built out, was they use federal money. It's not something we're really too interested in. We hope maybe some developers get interested in that, but you know, the federal government has had in the past enormous amounts of money, and they have created and got into, it's called the Home Program and CHODO program. It's part of the Housing and Community Development Act from the 90s. And it's helping people become homeowners, but there's a lot of education involved in it. If you're familiar with how nonprofit developers educate people about buying houses and, you know, their credit scores, it all ties into that. So there has been money in the past available to do that kind of stuff. Also, I would also just like to touch on that you can get a mortgage for a community land trust or a house in a community land trust. However, they're far and few between. Your local bank is not going to probably do that. But Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae are familiar with community land trusts and have done, you know, some lands. And Kentucky PNC is familiar with community land trust. Yes, thank you. Yes. And sorry about using jargon. Yes. You guys know, and again, back a little bit with the history, 2008, you know, the housing market kind of crashed, the Great Recession, you know, really hurt everybody. And there were a lot of delinquencies and foreclosures. A lot of our people lost their houses. You know, I probably know a handful of people that were foreclosed on. My whole neighborhood was double wides, and a factory came in. They came in, had these double wides ready. It was 0% down. And out of 40, there's probably 10 people that still live here and that weren't foreclosed on in 2008 and 9. So it's very sad, and again, a really upsetting, you know, part of my history, you know, living here. In the 2011s, a lot of people started trying to think about different alternative housing models, and that's when the National CLT Network was created. They brought a bunch of people together that were already doing the community land trust models, and they came up with some basic kind of ground leases and basic templates for the different aspects. And it's now called Grounded Solutions. We're a member of Grounded Solutions. It's a nationwide network, and they have a lot of templates. If you ever decide you want to get involved in community land trust and create one, they have a lot of templates, a lot of technical aspects. They created a CLT technical manual. Thank you. And they talk a lot about, you know, enforceability, resale formulas, taxes, finance, stewardship, you know, sustainability, which is crucial in a community land trust to make sure that you're sustainable. There's also, we're going next month to the Midwest CLT Coalition. We're going to that conference, and they cover a lot of technicalities about that because we're hoping to jump into the next level of financing and creating a capital stack. Yep, thank you so much for adding those. That's amazing. These are great, links. These are great links. So how many CLTs are there? So the 2022 census said, and it's produced by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. They're another very prominent institution that's involved with community land trust. They found hundreds of CLTs across 46 states and DC and Puerto Rico. I think they said there are over 700 community land trusts in the United States, which I think is amazing now. Yeah. So going on a little bit more here. I see some people are going to leave, so I want to talk a little bit more about the governance and just kind of some variations. No CLT is the same. I have been to quite a few different CLTs visiting, and no CLT is the same. I just recently went to Kepra. It's in Indianapolis. It's an urban CLT. They were started 30 years ago. A Black family, it's called Kepra Institute. A Black family was like, I don't like the way that my sons are being treated in school. They're not going to be able to get a job. They're going to end up in prison. So we need to do something. And this family got together and they created a community land trust. They started on their street. They bought their house. They bought a couple houses next to them. And now, 30 years later, they're pretty huge. They have a house on that same street where you can go and visit. We went and visited and stayed a week with them. They have businesses that they've created. They have a school. They have some downtown property for like remote work and a daycare. They just recently bought a 17-acre farm off an older lady. It has 2 houses on it. So they're doing some projects and programming there, but they build out their CLT to be very community-based. It includes, businesses, it includes families, it includes food processes, foodways. It's a pretty cool place to visit and check out. They do a lot of really good work, but it started from one family, one family that said this is not working. And now it's a huge, neighborhood. They own everything, I think, on 3 different streets. And they just waited, and bottom up, and they've helped several families that were going into foreclosure. That's the good thing about, I think, CLTs is kind of the governance model, is it's not about, getting rid of people when something does happen, like our model now is, it's based on people foreclosing, losing their jobs and things like that so other people can make money. And that's not what this is about. It's about helping people. So anyways, typically your governance board for your nonprofit is called a tripartite board. It's 1/3 leaseholders, people that live on the land, that own the land, that own the housing. 1/3 neighbors, like your community. And then the other third are like professionals, an attorney, an accountant, city council. So you have these 3 different groups that come together to, make technical decisions that work on the structure, that refine, what's going on. It's meant to keep the CLT responsive to changes in your neighborhood. Again, we've seen changes, since the 70s in housing. But also it's to keep it rooted, in your community. That board is meant to keep it rooted. I'm trying to think. Okay, so you guys got to have questions. So if you do, please let me know, because there's a lot of debates. A lot of people, I've been asked, so do we pay taxes? Is it like an HOA? I've heard a lot of things because people are trained to think one way about housing and about land. So yes, feel free to ask. So, okay, I want to talk a little bit about equity and the resale formulas. This is getting a little technical, but I'll try to keep it not so much so it's understandable. So depending, again, like I said, every CLT is different. Depending on what your board puts into your resale formula, it can be a variety of things. It can be wealth building. There is a CLT in New Orleans that you pay rent or your housing, and part of that goes into a fund so that if you ever do sell or you need to borrow against it, yep, Jane's Place, you have that money available. So that was their goal, is to help people build wealth. There is another one in Smash in Miami, Florida, that is focused on getting people, especially the most desperate, the houseless, very homeless people coming right out of jail, getting them back into housing. So that is their focus. So their board, when they talk about different things, it's renting, and how to keep rent low. They do a lot of rentals. They do have some home ownership, but it's a lot of rentals. Our focus is home ownership, is what we have thought about and what we think needs to happen. So like I said, everyone is different. KEPRA is very focused on community and political education. So part of their board focuses on those kind of things. But yeah, you can put a variety of things in your lease. Again, another thing that we added to our lease is you have to be part of a tenants union or a tenants group. Because we think that that's very important to fighting for housing. So we want our people involved. A lot of times the governance will also ask people to do community service work. We have 10 hours in ours, others have more. So those are things that you can add, but it's also debatable. Some people don't like that. They just want to buy a house. They don't want to be involved in the community. And maybe the community land trust is not the model for them, but there's a lot of debate about that. Also, ownership, is people get upset about, I don't own the land. Why don't I own the land? So we really try to educate people when they go into buying on a community land trust, what they're getting into. So when they do decide to sell, they know kind of where they're at. But that is kind of debatable by people who don't understand. Also, the HOA thing, and HOA's purpose is to build wealth in the land, to make it more expensive. A community land trust is not. The community land trust is to keep it affordable. So there aren't going to be a lot of rules about, you can't paint this, you can't do this, you can do that. So it's very different from an HOA conceptually, for sure. Paying taxes, again, that is something that is different depending on the community land trust. It also depends on the community. One of the things that we're trying to do here before we don't have property, before we get our first property, is we're trying to put into place or get our city council to pass ordinances that will be favorable to our community land trust. And one of the things that we have researched is that several communities have made it to where they're exempt from paying property taxes. So that can happen. That is not necessarily the model. Some models, the community land trust pays property taxes and insurance, and in other models, the homeowner does. So again, community land trusts are different, very different. When you start to look at them or research them, you'll find out, yeah, all these little things are very different because it depends on the community, what they need and what they want. So it's not like a straight line to a community land trust. Definitely not a straight line. I'm doing a time check here. Okay, so I'm going to skip the art until the end, unless somebody really wants me to. I'm going to go into like basics of a CLT. Okay, because somebody said, yeah, they're really interested in that. So this is my favorite part. Okay, so you create a nonprofit. That's what we did. We thought a lot about the people and the governance, the people that were going to be involved. So we started with our tenant union. We got a lot of those people involved. We found people who are interested in being homeowners, people who are very interested in land development. Then we reach out to our city government. And so our city government is a little bit involved. We have one member. Then we reach out to our nonprofit developers, because we needed to learn about how to buy property. That was one of the big aspects. We've been offered several properties. Since we've said we're going to be a CLT, people walk up, and the other day, I'll give you an example. This guy was like, well, I've got 22 duplexes for 2.2 million. Sounds great. I mean, it does, oh, wow, we could have, 22 duplexes in our community right together. But, and it's something that we've had to learn. And so I will say, no matter what, if you do decide to do this, you need to get your people financially literate on these aspects. Very important, because we went out and we looked at the place. One of them was really nice. The other one was not. If I can walk in and I know something's wrong, it's bad. I opened up the silver box. See, I don't even know what it's called. And there was one thingy in there. And I was like, yeah, there's supposed to be like a whole row of that. And if I know that, this is bad. So it looked good on the outside, but there was a lot of electrical problems, a lot of plumbing problems. Also, we dug into the history of the area, and there's a lot of lead pipes, and that's not something that we want to get involved in. We decided, we set some values and some ethics that we want to hold to, and so we're holding those standards. Yeah, we probably could have cobbled together maybe, some funding for this and took out a loan, and we could have done some rentals, and yeah, it could have, but that's not what we want to do. So bringing together the people that are going to be involved is very important, especially to hold on to those values and what you want to do, I think. Then, you need to think about your land sites. Like I just said, how do you want to acquire property? The mechanics, they were like, well, let's just go get foreclosures. Bye everybody, sorry. Let's go do foreclosures. Well, that's not something we want to do. We want to help people that are in foreclosure, get their house back. So it depends on, again, your ethics and values, how you want to get property. Russell Promise, if you're familiar with Russell Promise in Louisville, they have approached their city and they are working on getting land bank. The city has land banking there. So they have like 150 vacant properties in their land bank. And so Russell Promise is approaching them about those. And I think they're negotiating some of those, which is exciting, I think. They're working really hard and they should have properties within the next couple of years. Yeah, Russell Promise, they're doing amazing work in Louisville if you're not familiar with them. So there are a variety of ways to go about figuring out how, you want to do the land. Also, are you going to buy already made properties or are you going to develop those properties? If you want to develop, I suggest getting involved with a nonprofit developer. In the state of Kentucky, there is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that you can tap into. So if you're not familiar with that and you're interested in doing this, get familiar with Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So I'm moving on here. I don't want to talk about tax status, you all, unless you all want to.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Ask me. Yes.
Sorry,
Yes,
I jumped in a little bit
please.
late, and it's certainly possible I missed this, but could you give a brief overview of the CLTs like the history of CLTs in Central Appalachia? I mean, I know, the region's land, like, its ownership status has been the subject of many types of studies, and I know can be very complex, and ownership can be traced back to the 1800s. And so I'm wondering about the unique challenges of CLTs in the region, and then any examples that your team has to follow. And so anything about CLTs specifically in Central Appalachia would be really interesting.
There are 3 in Kentucky. I'm so glad you asked that. So I can talk about it. This is exciting. There are 3 in Kentucky, the Eastern Kentucky Community Land Trust, and they are, like I said, forming. That's what I'm part of. We have capacity. We're hoping to jump to the next level. We're looking for funding and building a capital stack to get property. We hope to be regional. We hope that it goes beyond us. You know, we hope it goes beyond Moorhead. The next one I would talk about would be Russell Promise in Louisville. They got started during COVID. They wrote, the city and an attorney and some other people come together. Cassandra Webb and Teresa Zabowski are the co-directors. They came together and got a grant to do some programming around this. And so they've studied and they brought people together. They're doing amazing work. They're working with the city to get land. They also worked with the University of Louisville to do designs, you know, to build the houses on these properties. So they're getting ready also to go into the next step. And there are several other areas, I think, in Louisville that are wanting to start community land trusts. So they're talking about doing a coalition. The other one is in Lexington. The third one is in Lexington. And it is, again, very unique. So that's another reason I'm glad you brought that up. They got started because the state wanted to bring in Newtown Pike, and they wanted to bring it through, again, a historically Black neighborhood. And the residents got together and fought back, and they said, hey, you know, we don't want this. We want something out of it. These are our homes. So they fought back and they created a community land trust for them. Again, unfortunately, it takes so long to get these off the ground and to build houses and things. I think there are very few of the original people who live there that live there now. But if you've not been there and you're close, you should drive down by there. It's down past Lex Live on the right. Beautiful neighborhood. They have houses, but they also have rentals. They work with a nonprofit developer. They also, their community come together during COVID and also fought for some ARPA money, and they created a park and a community building, which is amazing. They've really come together and created a beautiful community land trust and doing some amazing work. But again, it was out of the Department of Transportation. And I think from what my understanding, again, I'm on the outskirts of these others, the money from the Kentucky Department of Transportation is kind of ending. So they're looking at other aspects and working with other kind of capital stack people. I know that they are working with Winterwood, which is a big developer. So that is one of their, I think, partners for rentals. So, but it's amazing. It's beautiful what they've done. But again, very different than, you know, some of the others. Those are the only ones that I am aware of in Kentucky. I hope more start up. I know in Bowling Green, they have been talking about doing some. We've also been looking at buying mobile home parks because of the North Fork incident. And we have a national partner, if you're not familiar with Right to the City. It is a organization that works on housing. It is more political on the left side. Wonderful, great people. They have created a community land trust loan committee. And I've been part of creating that, not raising the money part, but creating kind of the stuff to get it off the ground. And we have raised about $4 million the last 3 or 4 years and been able to help community land trust in different areas. And I bring that up because we loan money to mobile home park in Nevada. It was after the North Fork, you know, we were looking for people who need to do this. And it was a group of immigrants in Nevada that wanted to buy their mobile home park, and they needed $11 million. And we did not have that, but we had some to get them started. And so we helped them bring together partners and other people that had community land trust there so that they could buy it, and also help them build capacity over the next couple of years till they have one in place. So we've been looking at those things here in Kentucky as well. In Moorhead, there are over 300 mobile home parks, which is crazy, but Kentucky is full of them. And a lot of times they exchange owners, and a lot of out-of-state owners are looking for those. And that's been happening here in Moorhead, and I'm sure other places. Yeah, yeah, yeah. North Carolina has, yes, several. Yes, yes. Podar Emma is in North Carolina, if you're familiar with them. Yeah, they're an amazing community land trust as well. Very community focused. They do a lot of, yeah, work. Does that answer your question kind of about Kentucky?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Annette.
Welcome. You're welcome. I'm glad you asked. That was kind of exciting, yeah, to talk about. We also, and I want to mention this, see where my time is. Okay. Yeah, please ask questions because I would rather it be a conversation. I want to mention this. I was going to mention it at the end, but I think now is kind of an appropriate time. There's a statewide campaign. It's called Welcome Home Kentucky, that I'm part of, that we're all part of. And one aspect is they're working on eviction expungement, but the other aspect, and we're just getting started on this, so if anybody's interested, please join us, is we want to get more money for community land trusts and cooperative land, you know. So we have been exploring the Affordable Housing Trust Fund through Kentucky Housing Corporation. We've met with them several times. We would like to change the scoring on that so that nonprofit developers, that money goes to nonprofit developers specifically, so that if they get involved in, partner with, or create a community land trust, that they will score higher to get that money. We also would like for Kentucky Housing Corporation to develop some type of community land trust pilot program. So we are currently working on coming together to come up with proposals to submit to KHC. We talked to them last week and they said, submit some proposals and we'll talk to you about it. So we're like, yes. So we're hoping to do that and also talk to the legislature. It's called Welcome Home Kentucky. Yep. And we're hoping to eventually move and ask legislators, you know, to put more money into that fund and housing as well, so that we can, again, we can control our own, you know, housing in our communities, because so many people are coming in, the tourism and things like that. Just down the road, a corporation from California came in and bought our mobile home park, and they changed all the rules, you know, and it costs, and this might seem normal to you all, but paying $50 for a background check or a credit check is not normal here. You know, it's not normal. And they've started doing that. And that's a big deal because a lot of our residents are on Social Security or they're older and they can't afford that, you know. Okay. Other questions? I love questions, you all. Any other questions?
I'm interested in just also like what, oh, sorry, Sierra, if you came off of mute.
Go
I just
ahead,
saw-
that's all right.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I have a question that's I'm not sure if it could be met by a community land trust. So, okay, there's two separate things. So I'm from Pittsburgh, which some may consider Appalachia, but not really.
Yes.
And so we have a community land trust here, who they both build new construction and they rehab like old derelict homes. And they're spread out all over the city. They are much more affordable than any other like home for purchase, but I went through the whole application process and I have a full-time job. And then at the time of the offer, I was still not able to afford it. And I was like, oh my God. I just, even with this like community help and these resources and this funding, like I don't think I will ever be able to own a home. And then the other part of that is I really want to create a space for community art making of natural pigment specifically. So like there's space needed for equipment, for like a library of resources, and it's like if I can't even afford a house, which could, you know, theoretically double as a studio, I could never even afford some type of community art space. So I just have no idea how to even get started with managing any space besides my rented apartment. So if you have any insight on that, I would really appreciate it.
I love that question. I love it because as we jumped in, we were like, we want a community land trust, and we had no idea what we were doing. So we have had to learn along the way. Again, you got to find one. My first suggestion is find people. Find people that want the same things that you want, that are interested in the same things that you are. Um, and then, yeah, I hate that about but that's what we found with the housing about not being able to afford it. And I hate that. And I am so sorry. As we're working with the nonprofit developer, and we're like, our people are not going to be able to, almost all the members of our community land trust crew would not also be able to afford that kind of housing. And so this is kind of where we're at now, negotiating with them. Because yeah, they want to look at credit scores, and like I got a grandma who was in a car accident that owes $4 million. She spent a year in rehab and in the hospital, and her credit score is never going to be right, but she's got 3 kids, and the nonprofit developer just built a home for seniors, and it has like a 4-bedroom in it, which would be perfect for her. But it's a $50 application fee, then it's $900 a month, and she can't afford that. That's her whole disability check, So I understand, and that is why though that you, and not laying this off on you, but you and people like you need to get involved in these housing conversations. And this is what I tell my tenants, I know you work a swing shift, I know you work hard, but you need to show up at city council with me and say, hey, I can't afford to live here. My grandma's lived here since the 1700s, and I can't buy a house. You need to help us. You need to do something. Because I think putting this pressure on them, our state legislatures, the housing corporations and stuff. And if I were you, this is me, and I love that you're doing art. I'm like, yeah. While we're talking, I would go back to that community land trust and start talking to them about how they can help people in your, income bracket, because originally that's probably why they got started, but then they have these people in there like the nonprofit developers, and these jobs that are like, we got to make sure we're sustainable, which is true. But how do you help people that really need the help? How do you make them homeowners? And that is, we've talked about, again, they pressured us to put renting in our bylaws, and we were like, no, we are focused on home ownership, because they tell us, well, if you rent, you can charge them a little more, and that'll pay for someone to like be the director, And I get that, but that's not why we got started. That's not why we're doing this. And they're like, well, you're not going to have an executive director for 10 years then. And we're like, that's okay. We'll volunteer until then. So I think that, yeah, you got to find people that have the same like values and wants and things like that. Also, I would say, again, partner with a nonprofit developer, find one that is not as focused on the capitalistic market. And I hope I'm saying the right things with this group, but one that's not as focused on that, because there are some federal funds out there for like maker spaces and things like that, and this is what we're kind of talking with our city council about, is like doing a maker space and having housing above it, and I mean, it's a compromise for us, but that would be a way to tap into some money and maybe pull it into the community land trust. So sometimes you got to compromise a little, but you need to stay focused on the people that need the housing. And yeah, I totally get it. I would not be able to afford now at all. So I definitely get it. And we have a lot of people that, yeah, that can't. So that's a great question. A great question. Yeah, and it's going to take a long time. The other thing that we found out, get your people financially literate and it's going to take time. Have patience. You're just starting. We started 5 years ago, and we're just now at the point where we have capacity and a board and bylaws and those things, and we're getting financially literate. So we're jumping into the next kind of pulling our capital stack together. So it's a slow process. Kepra was 30 years. The one in LA was 8 years before they bought their first building. And then it was another 8 years. They had to like renovate it, you know? So it's a slow process, but you're young, you can do it. Other questions, thoughts?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just gonna say, I know that Pittsburgh and Philly are far apart, but there is a group in Philly I'd be happy to connect you to called the Fire Your Landlord Fund. And they're
Yes.
getting, yeah, you know about them, Annette. They're just
Yes.
started. They've recently gotten connected to Right to the City.
Yes.
If you're interested, Sierra, that might be somebody, at least in your state, who's doing similar work that could help you connect to some resources.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that name? Sorry.
Fire Your Landlord Fund. Yeah.
Yeah.
My
And
Go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
My landlord pisses me off so bad. They own, like hundreds of properties in the Pittsburgh area, and my house is from the 1890s, and it was converted into like 5 apartments, and they bought it for so cheap in the 70s, and they just let it fall apart. And I would love to fire my landlord, and I would love to have like enough money to make it habitable. There's like no ventilation in my bathroom, but that's grandfathered in. And the landlord, lack of responsibility. This is no question, it's just a rant. So thank you.
And you need to get connected with people because there are a lot of people that are in the same boat and want to do the same things, and it's about, I go back to relationship building, and reach out to people. If you see something, that's what we did. We reach out to different people at the different community land trusts. We were just like, hey, we're interested in what's going on, Champlain, hooked us up. We've done a lot of virtual talks. Casey at the one in LA, he's great. Kepra's great. They were like, come up, visit with us. So a lot of these people will help you and share knowledge, Other questions?
I think I have another question.
Yes.
Well, I was just super interested in what you were talking about as your like what your team's doing in the short term, like those
Mhm.
issues around mold and like
Yes.
degradation. And could you talk about how the short term and the long term are like related, if at all? Is it merely just about sort of building kind of trust, or is there actual or does the short term work actually provide building blocks for the long term strategy?
It's all interconnected. um, our short-term strategy is, again, relationships. We're trying to build relationships. So we call them 4 campaigns if you include Welcome Home, but we have 3 local campaigns. One is with our campus chapter. We have a local college. And so we want to build that intergenerational. There was this, oh, it's the campus's fault. It's the rural people, So we wanted to build that because young people are so smart and they need to get involved and we want them to stay. And they're having all kinds of problems on campus. Mold. There used to be like 2 janitors for every building or 2 maintenance workers. Now there's 10 across the campus that has a farm too. Their garbage isn't getting taken out. The washer and dryers don't work. Air conditioning. I mean, some really bad issues. So then in the community, these big corporations come in and they charge $1,000, $1,200 for rent that local people can't afford. 2 or 3, college students go in together and can afford, but it has to be 2 or 3 of them. So there's, another issue. Then the deterioration, like Sierra was saying, a lot of landlords here, they may own 70 properties, but they've owned them since the 70s and they don't take care of them. They're just using that money. They don't put money into them. I was standing talking to someone canvassing, and there was sewage running between my legs, and they're like, "Oh no, this is a great place to live," because there aren't very many places to live. So that's another. There are all kinds of these, problems. So we want to bring people together to work on these. And we did this, canvassing, canvassed 2,000 people, brought our research together, and we looked at like the list of things that people, said that really needed worked on and different things. And that's how we kind of came up with the long term and short term. We kind of grouped them together. And like I said, we wanted to build relationships and kind of intergenerational. So we have also pulled people together and do like we got a upcoming like neighborhood party. We're doing it at the park. We invite everybody and we go out and ask people to come. From the college students to local people, renters, mobile home parks, and we do like different fun things. But we also make some free things available. That attracts different people. Like we have a photographer that does portraits, so families love to come and do that. So we just incorporate some things like that. And then, we have a petition for the proactive rental inspection. We're going to take to city council. We've been pressuring them to take care of some of these properties and rental properties. But we're in negotiations about, we don't want the landlord, because in Kentucky, we have no tenant protections unless you're in a city that's covered by URALTA. And there are only about a handful of those. So we're in negotiations about, having a fund that tenants can tap into, and then also some protections for them while renovations are happening, maybe rent caps on that kind of. So as we're doing this, we're also building political ed and knowledge and cultural organizing, so it's kind of a whole, the leaders at the top are seeing this whole kind of housing coming together. A lot of us grew up in the hollers, us older people, I'm older, grew up in a holler. My grandkids will never see that. I could play in the creek. I would never let my granddaughter in that same creek that I grew up in. And I hate that. And I want that back for them, future generations. And like the college kids want that, they want to be in the out. Anyways, I could, go on and on, but so we bring those people together, and we also talk about the Community Land Trust. We have like a membership meeting where we talk about all of this, and then we have separate meetings. So you can go to our proactive rental inspections, which is our community group. You can go to our Community Land Trust, or you can go to our campus chapter. But then we have 2 meetings a month. And at those meetings, we kind of bring it all together so that you're kind of aware of what's going on. That's kind of how we are approaching it. Does that answer your question?
Definitely, yeah. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And there are some groups in Tennessee. Woodford is a CLT in Tennessee that I know a little bit. There is a group in Memphis, a tenants union in Memphis that is connected to Right to the City. So there are, definitely several groups in Tennessee that I know about that are working on some of this stuff. Other questions? Thoughts?
I was just kind of interested in where everybody's from and why you came
Yes.
to this one. I know Sierra, I heard you were from or in Pittsburgh, and a little bit about your interest. I was just curious about other people who are on the call, what brought you here and where you live and are working, and maybe thinking about starting a community land trust.
Yes.
Well, I'm based in Central Ohio, and I've been here for a long time. But I'm doing an internship with Coalfield Development, which is based in Huntington, and they've just given me a lot of excitement about alternative development models. And so I was just personally interested in community land trusts. I didn't know much about it, so that's why I joined today.
I'm with Open Circle Studio and Central Appalachian Network, and I'm from West Virginia, but I currently live in Belfast, Maine. And so, you know, my heart is always in Central Appalachia, but you see a lot of the similar issues here as well. I feel like Maine has a big kind of, I don't know the right word, like the economic divide here is a little bit larger, I think. And it's interesting to see similarities and differences at the same time. But definitely have always been interested in alternative housing and how that looks, especially as a young person who is in a similar place as Sierra, of doubting that I will ever actually own anything ever. So it's really cool to hear about the community land trust, and thank you for sharing, Annette.
Hi guys, I'm Bethany. This is Sammy. We work for the Appalachian RC&D Council in Johnson City, Tennessee, and a lot of the work that we do is around land access, particularly for people who are trying to grow food to feed themselves and their communities, which is what brought us here today. But I personally have been very interested in land trusts and would love to start one.
We won't make anybody talk, but if Matthew or Bree, if you want to share, please do.
Sure, yeah. I'm originally from right outside Louisville, Kentucky, but I'm currently living in right outside Morgantown, West Virginia. So I've gotten more involved in the housing justice groups here and just more in community organizing and like most people that have talked have said, just interested in community land trusts and alternative housing. It seems to be something that ties people down, you know, having to pay rent and then having to work crappy jobs to pay that rent, especially when you have these big landlords coming in and housing developments being, you know, not affordable, not accessible to people. So I'm just really interested in different ways of living.
Hi, I'm out here in Eastern Kentucky. I live in a town called Hazard. I serve as AmeriCorps Vista for the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky. Um, and, there's several housing organizations out here responding to the flooding from 2022 out here and also the flooding this year, which has caused kind of an issue where even the floodplains that are mapped don't really reflect flood prone regions out here anymore. Like pretty much everywhere is in the floodplain. So there's this need to develop high ground sites, but the infrastructure to stretch like water and sewer and roads and electricity up to the top of the mountains or these strip mine sites, it's very expensive, very tricky. And kind of what's been happening is that you know that makes homeowners insurance very expensive to get the fire department to get up there, and housing is very unaffordable overall because it's just developers are incentivized to make expensive housing because it's just as expensive to hang an expensive light fixture than it is to put up a cheap one, and that's not serving the vast majority of people out here. I know that in where I live here in Hazard, the top 10% make 70% more than the average, which is just, kind of crazy. So it's sort of like literal castles on a hill is how things are structured out here, which is pretty dystopian. So.
Thanks. I just wanted to know where everybody was at, what your interest is in. Thanks for humoring me. But I'm Laura, and I'm in the session as one of the program coordinators for this year's Appalachian Big Ideas Festival, but also have a lot of interest in CLTs and affordable housing. I work with FAIR at Right to the City Annette as part of my my day job, and so I've been super excited, and Matthew, I used to work out of your office, so I was the CSO at the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky for a long time, and started the Appalachian Impact Fund, which funds Housing Development Alliance and all those folks. So, I'm so excited about there being more CLTs in the region. I just think it's such a wonderful strategy for a place that has been kind of marked by dispossession and out-of-state landowners and owners by, corporations and these big coal companies, as a way to take the power back for the people and create like sustainable alternatives, whether that's a community land trust like what Annette is building, which is so exciting, or even tenant-owned housing, tenant-owned trailer parks or apartment buildings. Like, there's just so much exciting work happening nationally, and I'm so grateful for folks like Annette and all of y'all who are like, planting the seeds of this to get this going in our region too. So I love it. So yeah, this has been great, Annette. And we have this room for like another 30 minutes. So as much as folks want to talk and ask questions and have a conversation, please do.
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, thank you for coming and sharing with me. I'll be here, yeah, for the next 30 minutes and would love to talk about everything and plug for Fur. They're the ones that have raised $4 million, yeah, every year for the last couple of years for CLT. So amazing work with Right to the City. So it's really good. And I'm excited, yeah, that everybody's interested in community land trusts or alternative housing, because we're going to have to do something. We really are. We really are. But yeah, I will talk, and I can talk more about, yeah, details if you want to, or contact me. There's a slide at the end. If you want to contact me, it's Annette at kytenants.org, or even you can call me or text. I would text me 606-548, and I can put it in the, but I love to talk about community land trust, and I like to problem solve. So we sit down and often have, this is my number and this is my email. We often have conversations about how we can fix things for each other. Put this in here. And yep, the slides are in there as well. They're not very exciting. Other questions? Anything you want to talk about?
I don't know if anyone else is interested in this, but I was a little bit excited about the quilting part as well. Can we talk a little bit about that more?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I'm excited also about that part. We did 3 different methods, and I didn't super go into detail, but I don't have to. Bye. We did appliques. We got heat bond from Walmart, and we got well, we started out, we tried to figure out, yeah, kind of how to do quilts. At the time, neither one of us had ever really done a quilt, so we're like, let's do this. So we just ordered quilt squares, cotton quilt squares, and Hill and Hollow is a farm in somewhere south in Kentucky. They came up, they grow indigo. And so they brought indigo, and we have a local member. You were talking about foodways. They're very interested in foodways. And so they have a farm, and they've got a lot of different stuff on it. So we went there, and Hill and Hollow came up, and we dyed these quilt squares, and they're blue and yellow. And I can show you. Yeah, I don't know if they'll show up here, but yeah, here's one of the yellow ones with goldenrod from our local farm. And then we used indigo on some of the others. We dyed them, and then we took them again to different communities, and we did appliques. We got heat bond from Walmart. And so you just kind of iron the heat bond on to the fabric, and then cut out the shapes and peel it off and iron it on to the yellow or blue square. And then we did embroidery. We learn a lot about embroidery too. I've done a little bit of knitting and embroidery, but it was really interesting, you know, to see different techniques. And as we went to each city, we got to learn a little bit more. You know, you can use 1 thread or 3 threads or 6 threads, and it makes the design look better or worse, you know, because sometimes with 6 threads, you're making a hole in the fabric. Sometimes it's too much. So sometimes it's better to go with a few. And yeah, I don't know if you can see it on this one. We did a little bit, yeah, on kind of the outside. Then we also brought fabric markers because we knew we were going to have some disabled people that may not be able to utilize their hands well. So we brought fabric markers, and we also got fabric ink, and we bought a set of ink prints. Yep. And here's some of the fabric markers on the bottom there. Oh, let's see if we can bring that up here.
I think it's the blur thing again. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I see it a little bit.
I know, I'm trying, sorry, but yeah, on the bottom there, you can see it, yeah, a little. We use fabric markers, you know, and also the print. And so we have, yeah, quite a few of those, you know. And then we just put them together, sewed them together, and we took the big, we wanted to do it in community as well. So that's why Kat took the big pieces and they did it together at Art Farm. So that's kind of how we did it. You know, we made it easy and accessible for everybody, just kind of simple things. And we wanted everybody to express, you know, what they wanted. And on the second slide, actually, are the finished quilts in the slide deck. We have 2, we still have some squares that we're going to put together in some smaller things. And like I said, we're going to auction them off. I'm really excited about that to raise money for the Community Land Trust. Because again, like everybody was saying, it's so expensive to build. And that's what we're hearing from the nonprofit developers are, you know, if you can buy the land or if you can pay for it in Eastern Kentucky, you know, it costs so much to get water and utilities somewhere. That's what, when you said that, I was like, yeah, that was one of the things that came up in our canvas was people were saying it's 45 minutes for the police to get here, you know, it's 45 minutes for the ambulance to get here. So what can we do, you know, in those, in our communities to ensure that we're helping each other? And it's hard, yeah, very expensive. I think to come off the main road, they told us for one of the developments we looked at was going to be like $500,000. That, you know, that's on top of the land and building the houses. And we were like, what? We didn't figure that in, you know? So that's where that financial literacy part comes into looking at this. We were like, whoa, 500,000 just to hook up water and utilities. It's a lot of money, you know, that people that are working at, you know, the local factory, don't have. So that's something that we've been looking at is how can we, you know, fundraise and get money and get it outside of the government. And so art has kind of come into that as well. So we've been talking about how to incorporate that into some of what we're doing, like the maker space talked about earlier. We would like to do a maker space and housing kind of thing. So do you have other questions about like the quilting part of it? I could go into detail, but
I mean, it's fantastic to see. I feel like there's kind of a movement towards that connection of maker space and living space. So you're kind of bringing it together more in my mind, even more. So I appreciate that. And yeah, I love how, I think when people are working with their hands together, it gets the mind and people speak more. They kind of get deeper into what they're saying. And so it's fun to see. And quilting, especially, I feel like symbolizes home in such a deep way for people from the Appalachian area.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, absolutely. And the stories flowed. Yeah, when we were doing it, they flowed. And there were guys and girls. And like I said, the mechanics, the big macho guys come out with their families and were doing, you know, they were having fun and they were opening up. Yeah, it was a great way, especially not to be sexist, but for guys to open up, when they're doing something. So yeah, they were like, yeah, we can do this and we can do that. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And I was like encouraging them because yeah, and they are opening up a tool library, in their community now. So that came out of that little thing. I thought it was really cool. Yeah, quilting, yeah, and sitting around doing art. And it was very important. Again, a lot of us are poor. And we talked about, yeah, when we were kids, we couldn't afford art. We would have loved to have, done some of these things. So we wanted to make it affordable for everybody so you could just come and do it and not have to worry. And we often sent things home with people too that, we haven't seen, but it's okay. We knew that going in. So we sent home, yeah, embroidery stuff with some people and yeah, different things. So it was very community minded. Yeah. Yeah. And we got just as much out of it, I think, as everybody else did. We got a lot of knowledge and yeah, a lot of people were excited to be part of it. Yeah. And if y'all do one, invite me because I like to do that kind of stuff. But it's a great way to bring people together and talk about, yeah, complex ideas. Thank you. Other questions? Anybody else want to share anything? Do you have any questions, Kelly? You just came back. We were just sitting here talking about like the quilts and how it brought people together and things like that. Not to put you on the spot, but yeah, if you got any questions, feel free. We're kind of in, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to miss that part, but I am here in Southeast Ohio where we have a community art center that hosts the contemporary kind of showcase of quilting. And I feel like I can really connect with that idea of how impactful quilting can be as an art form, but as a storytelling device and as a way to really bring people to issues and ideas. So I've appreciated all the part of this that I was able to join into.
Yeah, if you do anything like that, invite me. I like to do that kind of stuff, just as a participant too.
Yeah, no, I looked up the Kentucky Tenants organization. Is that the best contact for you? Is through that organization, or did you share?
I'll re-put mine in here. I did share that. Yeah, that's an easy way to find me.
Okay.
But here's my email, and then if you want to text me, I don't mind. Yeah, I probably don't answer, but I text a lot. Just so you know, if you're a phone caller, I'm more of a texter. Yeah, this was a really fun project, but I feel like it really opened a lot of people talking about community land trust too. I feel like it opened a lot of doors here in Kentucky and got people talking. And I hope it continues. And I hope some more art projects come up around community land trust. I'm excited about that. We're going to do a potluck to kind of end it all at the farm that we started at. So we're planning that for October, just to kind of bring it together and yeah, start thinking about auctioning off the quilts. It was a long process too. And myself and the artist live in two different cities too. So yeah, the uh, supplies would go back and forth and just different things. It took us, about a year and a half to finish it from start to finish. And like I said, love to talk community land trust.
Okay, I got a question, Annette. How
Yes.
much do you love to discuss community land trust? Because
I
I feel like I would pester you endlessly and need to pay you as a consultant in order to like figure this out. ultimately. I mean, there's no like guide to community land trusts for dummies kind of thing. It's, would you write one?
Several people have asked that. I would help somebody do it maybe, but yeah, I love to talk about them. Yeah, just call me or text me and
Text you.
email me or whatever. Yeah, I do love because I think it's important that we do this. I think it's really important. Yeah, I'm not very happy with the market, and
Yeah.
just hearing two people in this conversation say, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. I'm like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
So
I hear that every day from folks who are aspiring to grow food. I could never buy
yes.
land to grow food on, which is why, the land access piece for us, we try to connect people who have land to people who want to farm land without having to have a purchase made. But that's few and far between that kind of kismet relationship can be made. Whereas, it can be a built-in piece of a land trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need 100 of them tomorrow, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And that's a lot of our members want to do the same. They have an apartment or they live in public housing and they've got plants all over because, yeah, they want to grow their own food and stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So one of our members has developed kind of community plot, and we've connected with our community kind of why it's spread out and not just about housing, as we've connected with our environmental groups as well, because some of our people are very interested in, having fresh food available
Mm-hmm.
because it's important. And our college kids, that's been a side project of theirs too, is to get fresh food on campus. They've been able to get some things done. They're right now fighting for a little bit of land to grow something on. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they're looking at maybe trying to do a community land trust for student housing as well, something that they can take care of and own. So this could be, a lot of different types of projects. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
about community. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming on
Absolutely.
here today and sharing your wisdom. And it's super encouraging for me to see so many young people at this session, right?
Yep.
I'm 52 this year, and it's always just been me and a bunch of like other old hippies that are always
Yep.
talking about this. So
Yep.
seeing young people like taking an interest and is wonderful. I love it.
Yes. And I agree. And I say reach out, reach out. That's what we did. We just went to the college because that's what it was a bunch of older people that, were like, we want this, we need this, we see it. But and that's why one of our targets for our community land trust is the young people. We have some great minds here, that are really interested in also this kind of work. And we want to keep them here, but there aren't any jobs. So how do we do that? Again, that's been another part of our work. We've also been transportation is another thing that, a lot of things come out of our canvas. We're lucky enough that we do have a bus system. It's not very good. And one of the things our members noticed was that like people in wheelchairs sit in the rain waiting on the bus. And so, they've gotten involved in the transportation system as well. So a lot of things really came out of just the community land trust. But love to talk about them. I like to get in the nitty gritty taxes and stuff like that too. So that's why I kind of cut it short because I know a lot of people aren't really into that kind of stuff, but I kind of am. I'm getting into it
Yeah,
because
I
I'm learning.
almost raised my hand when you were like, who wants to hear about taxes? But I read the room and didn't, so I'll just
Right,
ask you about that later.
right, right. And zoning, zoning
Yes,
is,
zoning. Oh my gosh, zoning is huge for us too. We have because of the land access piece, we have worked with a lot of people who are urban gardening, and the
yes,
county will come in and like chop the tops off of their blueberry bushes because they've reached over 4 feet high, and crazy things like that. The policy has to keep up with the solutions. I mean, we're all in this solution-based mindset, but the policies are often the completely opposite of what is a viable, practical solution these days.
Yes, yes, yes. And especially our young people need to go to those meetings and be like, hey, we went to city council and they're fighting about chickens in town. And we're like, we want fresh food, you know? Yes, because like you, they don't want to put in fruit trees. They're like, we want to put in this memorial tree walkway. And we're like, great, let's put in fruit trees. And they're like, oh no, we can't do that. Yeah.
Because of the mess, I guess.
Yeah, yes, yes. And we're like, you know,
Yeah.
That is
That's-
one thing I've seen here at some of the parks nearby me that have fruit trees, and it's a new thing to me. I've never seen it, and I'm like, yeah, it just makes so much more sense. I can go on a walk and pick free blueberries. I can have an apple, it's just it really, and there's an abundance. Like you think that it would cause people to take too much or, cause a mess. I haven't seen either of that yet.
yeah. Yep, very encouraging, yes. But yeah, zoning and yeah, taxes and all that fun stuff. And they zone out, yeah, agriculture. We're having a zoning fight right now because a lot of people are wanting to come into Moorhead because we're like the hub here in our area. And they want to come in and build gas stations and all these different kind of things because we also have the college here. And one of the zonings from many years ago is that if you did not state what your zone was, that it reverted to agriculture. So we have these spots all over our county that are agriculture, like right in the middle of town and on the outskirts and things. And so people are wanting to sell their land and they're coming to city council and wanting to change the zoning. And so that's been a big issue, do they have the right to change that, since it's their land and they own it? Or, does the city have the right to keep it agriculture because tourism and, community good and things like that? So that's been a big issue. And then we have a diesel canopy that just came into our city and cleared out some of that land. And right across from it is one of our community kind of spaces. And so that I think there's going to be a lot of tension around that. And I hate that, but yeah, zoning is a big issue.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful, Annette. You are just a wealth of, of knowledge, a fountainhead of knowledge for all of us. And I'm so happy some of the connections that have been made here. So I know I'm looking forward to following all of this work and seeing more CLTs pop up across the region, hopefully in Tennessee soon, Bethany.
Yes.
So thank y'all, and feel free to come off mute and give your appreciations or throw up your emoji reactions for Annette and her time today.
Thank you all for coming
Yeah.
and talking to me.
Best of luck to everybody in your work out there.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much, Annette.
See y'all. Thanks, Annette. It was great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we appreciate it. I was going to tell you, Annette,
Yes.
I'm going to stop the recording now.